The water is freezing cold, isn't it? It flows straight from the mountains. In winter there is no river. It's snow and ice that are melting. Now I live in the Swiss countryside, and I really enjoy the fact that I live in the countryside, as there are not so many people here. Nature all around, I can walk barefoot, smell different herbs. For me it's a real pleasure. In Geneva, Bern or Zurich I couldn't live. I came to Switzerland as a refugee, running away from the war with my sister and my niece. I had been to Switzerland before. I came here to visit people I knew. 5 years ago I came here to learn the technology of Swiss raclette cheese making. My name is Tetiana Dyadechka and I'm craftologist from Poltava. I do have a fairly small production facility. This is our main brew kettle for 500 liters. Film me, I'm going to set it up for you now. It will be a full bottle. I met some good people, then I came here again and brought a group of Ukrainian cheesemakers, and I came here to these people I knew. This is my friend Patrick. He is a cheesemaker, he has his own cheese factory, and he invited me here to wait out the war and get away from it.
Чи можу я тобі щось показати? Це 5 хвилин. Це наші традиційні корови. Їх залишилось, може, 1007 чи 8, і все, фініш.
They have a tradition of their shepherds. These associations of people, initiative groups, they come together. Some are engaged in the production of cheese, some take care of the cattle to have milk for cheese, and this is in 1956, and Patrick runs this alpage. What is meant by an alpage? It is a cheese factory where you can also keep cattle, but it is not necessary. There must also be an adjoining area. For example, this alpage is for 100 cows, and there must be a pasture for that number of cows. An alpage is not only a building, but also certain areas that are assigned to it. All this is controlled by the state. Here you can't buy land or build anything, because they have already built up the area where it was allowed, and the state said enough, we don't build anything else. It's very cool when you go around these places, you can really see the nature. They did it for agriculture, as they call it, and these are very cool rules. I wish we could have it that way too. I mean, you can build, but up to a certain degree, because nature has to be protected.
This temple has the largest organ in Europe, and they are very proud of it. Besides, they have a profession here, a man who goes out on these towers at 10 p.m. It's quite a traditional thing for them. You see? And in different directions, south, north, west, east, he shouts out the time. That's the legend of the city. It's very interesting. By the way, this is where the path of Santiago de Compostela, the way of St. James, passes through countries like France, Portugal, Spain. Inside there is a scallop shell. I used to dream of walking this way. I think I'm going to do this. It's huge. But you can practice a little bit here. Walk 1 kilometer from here and it would already count. My name is Yulia Pankova. I'm the host of the program Revisor. I'm also an investigative journalist in the past. I had my own business. It was gastronomic trips around the world, and I also organized culinary workshops in Ukraine. I lived in Kiev, but at the beginning of the war I made a mistake. With my parents, I went near Hostomel, the village where we spent 2 weeks under occupation. The aviation started working right away on the first day, a lot of helicopters, and a real full-scale war began. We were in a trap, with Borodyanka behind us, Dimir on the left, Bucha and Hostomel on the right, and I understood that I could not get out even through forests. It was very scary. The Kadyrovцы came to us. They were heavily outfitted. Each of them had man-pads, needles. They had banned ammunition, very interesting weapons. Machine guns were hanging at the ready. They were incredibly well prepared. And I didn't tell this to anyone. But I was so scared that I physically peed my pants when I saw them. My mom started getting hysterical. I thought they were going to kill my mom, and they said, "Don't be afraid, we won't do anything to you." We were lucky because we were not surrounded by assholes. At least they had some kind of education. It was scary when they took my phone. I handed out this phone and he said, "And you've got the most expensive phone here." I said, "Yes." I was very afraid because I had so much important information in my phone, so much stuff to kill me for. And he said, "Yes, you have the most expensive phone? Take it and hide it." Do you understand? How come? What was that? I don't know. It seems to me that God just took me in his hands, me and my parents, and carried us out of that basement. Because there were so many chances to die there. I had an incredible fear of the hunger. We also had our friends come over. My dad said to me, "We have a lot of stuff. I come to the basement and I have zero. I have 2.5 kilos of potatoes. I understand that I have no medicine, no food, no light. The generator won't work soon because the petrol is ending. The gas is cut off. You understand? There's no communication. You realize that sooner or later you have to get out of there." There was a house next to us with 3 families, and a kid almost starved to death because there wasn't enough baby food. And the kid was incredibly allergic to regular country milk. He was vomiting. He had a high fever, and we didn't know if we were going to lose him or not. My parents came and said, "We can't stand it anymore." I took my mother's prayer. I said to myself, "Don't think about it, just pray." And we started to get out. We had white ribbons. My mother held a flag with her hands. I tried to get through as quickly as possible, and the flag was made of a sheet and a mop. One of the requirements of Russian soldiers was that you could only drive out with white flags. So she held the flag with one hand and prayed like this with the other. We drove through 3 checkpoint blocks. They shelled us with grads, and only when we saw our strong, tough guys we realized that we got out of there. We began to cry, and for the first time I felt more or less safe. For 2 weeks we were in western Ukraine, in Bukovina, in a small cottage town, but twice, 20 kilometers away, they bombed a certain military base. The second time I felt this basement dread when a fighter plane took off. You could hear a big bang. That sound made our little cottage shudder. I was just sitting there, and I was hit hard in the back. I realized that I didn't feel safe in Ukraine. And just then, a friend of mine from Switzerland wrote. We met at the Founders Convention in the business club. He said, "Yulia, come here. Yulia, come."
I didn't want to go because it is my country. I volunteered as much as I could. I did some work. But my husband said, "Go ahead, it will be easier for me." My parents also said to me, "Tanya, take your sister and niece, the 4-year-old girl. They won't go without you." We all got in the car and came here to Switzerland on March 18th. My friend met us in Switzerland and settled us in his house right away. From the first day, the Swiss took us into their embrace, and to this day we feel this support. We were supplied with everything we needed. We were helped with our S status. In the first weeks, the Swiss brought us a lot of food. We told them not to bring so much. We couldn't manage to eat it all. All our neighbors who found out that we came from Ukraine were bringing food. My friend settled us in his apartment. All neighbors brought us food. My niece was given clothes and toys. The Swiss are people who are used to comfort, and they want to give us that comfort. They want it and want to do it. And all their actions are aimed at providing comfort. For them, it is important that we do not feel limited in some way. Till now, I have not seen Swiss people express any disappointment with Ukrainians. They have never said that they are tired of Ukrainians.
Друзі, хочу поділитись корисною інформацією як для тих українців, хто вимушено опинився за кордоном, так і для тих, хто залишився в Україні. В ці нелегкі часи для багатьох віддалена робота чи не єдина можливість заробляти, щоб підтримувати свою родину та, що важливо, продовжувати донатити. І чи не найкраща така робота – це IT-сфера, бо на ринку IT завжди є вакансії, а працювати можна з будь-якої точки світу. Компанія GoIT вже давно надає якісну IT-освіту українцям і зараз запрошує всіх на тест-драйв. Це безкоштовна можливість спробувати себе в 4 різних IT-напрямках. Ви спробуєте себе в професії веб-дизайнер, розробник, проджект-менеджер, QA-інженер. Чому ще варто піти на тест-драйв? Ви потрапите у круте ком'юніті однодумців. У вас буде ментор, який завжди допоможе. Усі навчальні матеріали розраховані на людей із нульовим розумінням цієї сфери. При бажанні впорається кожен. Якщо вам цікаво, реєструйтесь на тест-драйв за посиланням в описі. Це ваш шанс потрапити в IT.
В мене тут є ще сировар. Ну, в мене 2 гори, і на одній жінка робить сир. Її звати Люда. Вона працює зі мною вже 7 років.
То вона українка?
Так, вона з України. Була одружена з німцем, і вона вміє робити сир.
On February 23rd, I had just arrived in Switzerland. At 4 a.m. I started getting text messages. They sent me videos showing the bombing of Mirgorod, 40 kilometers from the village where my parents live. I immediately started calling my parents, my sister. I had a fit of hysteria. On the same day, I had a meeting scheduled with the family where I used to live. I couldn't cancel this meeting. We hadn't seen each other for a very long time, and I understood that people were expecting me to visit, and I wasn't in the mood at all. But I pulled myself together and went. I thought I wouldn't tell them anything, but they already knew all about it. When we sat down at the table, they are very religious people, and they always pray at the table. Then they finished that prayer and started to pray for Ukraine. That's when I burst into tears. Although they're strangers, where is Ukraine and where is Switzerland? They had only heard about Ukraine from me, and they were very worried about the situation.
When we came here in 2016, when they asked us if we were Russians and we answered that we were Ukrainians, people kept apologizing. They were very sorry that they called us Russians. I'm very lucky, but I am surrounded by people who know what Ukraine is. They have this understanding since 2014, since the annexation of Crimea. I think it was a turning point for them when they realized that there is such a country as Ukraine, that it is a country of Europe, and that it is even bigger than France. Everyone understood that. and everyone apologized when they asked if I was from Russia.
When I hear people complain about the Swiss, I personally heard it from some Ukrainians who complained that they were not given something or limited in what they were given. I don't know, maybe I was so lucky, maybe there is really something to be thankful for here. I've been given a lot of things. I don't know about Geneva, but in our migration center, when we received the first financial aid, we were given vouchers for 100 francs for shoes, a voucher for 50 francs for clothes at Caritas, a card with a 25% discount on groceries. My sister and I got this help when I didn't have a job. I didn't need to change dollars anymore. We had enough money we were getting. We had enough for everything. For food, sometimes we could allow ourselves to go out for wine.
I always say there are two standpoints, a standpoint of a fly and a standpoint of a honeybee. What you meditate on is what you will be. Do you understand? You can find disadvantages everywhere. You can always dislike something, and it may not meet your expectations. I believe that you have to take responsibility because that's one of the Swiss values. Rules, openness, individuality, and autonomy. If you realize that you can find work by yourself, that you can find a course by yourself, that you can find a place to live by yourself, you just do it. So there will be no victim position in Switzerland. It's very tough here. If you have the ability to take responsibility in your own hands, this is the country for you.
We see a very big difference between people who are actually running away from the war and from the bombs. They have very different attitudes about what the state is doing for them when they come here. And there are people who are just looking for a better life, taking advantage of the situation. Unfortunately, we see these cases. People belonging to the second category, they remain a very unpleasant impression, which is very detrimental to people in the first category. It is very difficult to explain abroad that there are different people in every country. It is very important to remember both for us people who live here long enough and for those who come here that we are all ambassadors of Ukraine today. The way we behave creates an impression of the whole country and has an impact on how Ukrainians will be treated in the future. My name is Nadia Lara. I'm 36 years old and I was born in Donetsk. Now I am the head of the association Ukraine Reborn, which we founded after the war started. We are engaged in the integration of Ukrainian refugees into the French-speaking cantons. Of course, there is a very big difference between the people who came before the war and the people who are forced to come now. Switzerland is a very closed country for migration. It's not easy at all to just move here and get a residence permit, a work permit, find an apartment. It's all very complicated procedures here and very controlled by the state. Basically, when I moved here, the first time the problems we faced were different from the problems that Ukrainians who migrate because of the war face now. We didn't have a work permit. Migrants who run here from the war and have S status have that permit. They can work freely, like independent, in any canton. It's a very flexible system. We didn't have that. Today in Switzerland, there is a very great desire, a very great sympathy for people who came from Ukraine. Switzerland is doing a lot to make sure that people who came here get the support they need. More support than the third country migrants who came before the war.
Today there are about 50,000 Ukrainians here. I tried to calculate how much rent costs, how much insurance costs, how much transport costs, everything that we were provided here in Switzerland. They spent about 6,000 francs per month for each person. In total, it's about 170 million francs. It was people who gave us this money out of their own pockets. They gave us the opportunity to work. In fact, they have equalized us in rights with those people who spend their money to be able to work here. I'm incredibly grateful to them for that. I'm incredibly grateful for those people. I can't imagine if we could have done the same thing, if we could have sheltered so many people, if we knew there were conflicts in Syria, in Eritrea, etc.
My name is Marina Zakrevska. I am 40 years old. I'm Ukrainian. I came to Switzerland in 2016. I got a contract for work and we came here with my family. I have 2 children and my husband, who just returned to Ukraine because he couldn't stay here. After the first month of the war, he had to go to help the army. From the very beginning of the war, the task was to make everyone aware of what was happening in Ukraine, and we had to do it as loudly as possible. We were very active here in the restaurant, and the Swiss media saw that we were very active in trying to raise the topic of the war. A carousel of Swiss media came in and filmed us trying to organize all different kinds of protests. You could say that journalists were living in our home, filming my children living through the war, trying to do everything to stop the aggression in Ukraine, stop this horror of war. My husband and I divided our work so that he worked to collect aid for the army and buy everything they needed, and I, in turn, helped the refugees who came here. It was not only families, mothers with children, it was also minor children who were sent here by their parents who couldn't come on their own. I helped them to find housing, to find a school where they could continue their education. I am surprised at how the Swiss began to perceive the Ukrainians. It is a very closed nation, but they were able to open up and allow them to live here. The Swiss have invited families to their homes and continue to do so. A lot of Ukrainian families live in Swiss families. Ukrainians have their own room, their own bathroom, they get help with food. It's something unbelievable how the Swiss have embraced it.
We came here and thank God my friend gave me the opportunity to live here. I'll probably be leaving, and that kind of moving is okay. I really don't want it because now I live in downtown and more or less everything is cool. We're being sheltered. You wouldn't believe it.
When we arrived, we settled in my friend's house. For 2.5 months, we lived at Patrick's. Then we were given social housing. It's about being open to the world. We had one social action where we collected money for Ukraine. It was Catholic Easter in Switzerland. We baked Easter bread, had a recollet party with wine. During the preparation for this holiday, I met the leader of our commune, and during one of our conversations, he asked where we were living now and what we were going to do next. I said we didn't yet know what to do next. He said that he would find out about social housing for us. Through his acquaintances, he found it out, put us in touch with the right people. We were lucky we were given social housing here in downtown Sierra. It's a 5-story house with 12 Ukrainian families, and it's very cool that we have such a Ukrainian community. It's free housing. We don't pay anything for it. We don't know how long we were given this housing. We have a permit for a year, and we automatically have housing for that period, and then we'll see.
Everyone in our group had a different story. Many of them were put in housing with a host. They were able to find an apartment for me and my family. The owner gave us this apartment for free for 3 months according to the contract. Then she would contact social services to pay for this housing according to their calculations.
Depending on who you talk to, depending on what your situation is, you may have different conditions. From what I have heard so far, they give 1,100 francs per person for accommodation, for rent or sub-rent. But just so you understand, it's still very hard because the market is very saturated. If you are an expat with a salary, with guarantors and everything else, it's still not a fact that you will be rented an apartment. If you are a refugee with S status, in principle, this is a very good status. You are not a person without papers, because here it is still a very complicated process, and it will be difficult for you to rent an apartment on your own. Of course, it is much harder for people without a job, without permanent status, who do not know whether they will go or stay when the war is over. Then, for those who have citizenship of Switzerland, France, or some other country of the European Union, landlords will not make a choice in favor of a refugee, even if he is from Ukraine. We hope to start working together with the Swiss government on what to do next, because we understand that, unfortunately, the war is not over, and the solutions that we have now for Ukrainians to live, to integrate Ukrainians, sooner or later, they will come into question. If people live in a family, it also can't last long. A few months is one thing, and when the question is about half a year or more, it's another matter. It is necessary to find ways to help people here to build their lives in a new way.
If a person who decides to come to Switzerland doesn't have an address, it is necessary to settle in refugee center. There are specially built hangars where a very large number of people live, about 100-150 people. Refugees sleep there for the first 3 days. Priority is given to the elderly and people with children. When we were coming here, we understood that we already had an address where we would live, so we could already apply online right away. Then you have to come here, to the center, we call it a VAM, and inform them that you came to Switzerland. Then they take your fingerprints, your biometric data, and then you wait for the confirmation letter. We basically got our status in 2.5 months. That's how it looks like. It is granted for 1 year. Then they will decide whether to prolongate it or not. For Switzerland, this is the first time such a practice of S status implementation has taken place. Because of this, there were different situations. Some received the status faster, others had to wait longer.
We submitted the questionnaire online. A week later, we got an email, and another week later, we got a letter to the physical address where we lived at Patrick's. And another week later, we went to Bern, to the migration center. We completed the form. We had no answer for a month. And in May, we just got a call, and they told us to go to FISP. It's 20 minutes by train. They said that we have to fill out the form again. We said that we had already done it. And they told us that the rules had changed, and we had to do it all over again.
It seemed to me that the bureaucracy in Ukraine, in the post-Soviet states, is very inveterate, and there is nowhere worse than that bureaucracy. This was my impression until I moved to Western Europe, Switzerland and Holland. By the way, it was a little easier in Holland, probably because it was after Switzerland. Switzerland surprised me by the fact that here everything takes a long time to be decided. It takes a lot of time to get some paper signed. There is no chance to speed up the process in some way. If you call, you can argue, and it will slow down the process even more.
My advice is that once you arrive in Switzerland, there is a one-time aid of 950 francs a day. They count it before the paperwork for about a month.
From the moment you apply, fill out the form, you can receive cash aid of 480 francs per month. When we lived in the village, in the mountains, we bought our groceries at the nearest supermarket. It was a private luxury store, and I was quite shocked when I went there and bought food for our dinner for 80 francs. I told my sister that it would not be easy for us to live here on that money. Then I found out that there are different levels of stores here. For example, the dinner store, it's the cheapest store, and they also have great groceries. Every Saturday there is a great discount on meat. It can be up to 40%. On Wednesdays they have discounts on other products. This doesn't mean that it is an expired product. It's just such a tradition. In some stores every Sunday there is a certain discount. You just need to know it. There is such a group, Ukrainians in Valais. In this group there are not only refugees, but also Ukrainians who have lived here for a long time. In this group, people write different things, looking for clothes of a specific size. There are a lot of different volunteer centers. I worked for a few months in one of them. They distribute food such as pasta, rice, sugar, salt, some hygiene products. It is important to know these volunteer centers. They are not state centers, they are associations of people. The second point, near our house, across the street, there is a church where every Wednesday during the day they bring groceries that expire in a few days. These are food kits. There can be anything: strawberries, cherries, greens, etc. They give you a coupon. You write down how many members you have in your family, and you go with a social worker, and he offers you different foods.
They call me and say, Yulia, well, of course, you're in Switzerland. I say, yes, I'm in Switzerland because I always choose the best. But, jokes aside, but it's really expensive here, and you have to think before you go here. You have to plan everything well. Actually, you can live on 370 francs per month. You can buy the necessary products, but you have to know where. You can get Caritas cards. It's a grocery chain with discounts. You can get them at registration centers like EVAM. The Red Cross used to provide assistance in the amount of 100 francs. There are churches in some cities that provide food assistance. This food package may include pasta, rice, sugar, hygiene products, etc. This aid is given once a week. It is quite necessary help, and it's really important. Many people go to humanitarian centers and get things there. A lot of people come in winter clothes. but not many people know where to go. There are certain groups and social networks, Ukrainians in Switzerland, in Geneva, and so on. You can write there what you need. My acquaintance Yulia found a cool manage for the baby, because Danya crawls all over the house, and at least in this way something keeps him in place. So everything is cool. We knew we were medically protected. When my mom got sick, instantly. When she has got mental relief, the health problems of my mom came up, and we knew we needed to go to get help at the hospital. It's obligatory to have your family doctor, because he's the one who sends you to other doctors. But if you have an urgent case, you go to the hospital and go to the emergency department. Here you will have to wait. It can take 6-7 hours. Here they don't treat you like in our country. They give you ibuprofen, you feel better, and that's it. Here they try to find out the reason, and only after that they prescribe a treatment. My mother had a locked nerve in the muscles in her shoulder, because when she was sitting under bombardment, her muscles were always clenched. And when her psyche started to relax, she started having breakdowns and her shoulder started to hurt a lot. We went to the ambulance and told them, please do something, give her a blockage or something. They said, no, people don't die because of pain, we will find the reason. For about 2 weeks, she suffered from a terrible pain, but it was getting better little by little. It's a different kind of medicine here. But they help. They really help.
It's hard enough for Ukrainians to be here. They had a full-fledged life, a job, and they left it all in Ukraine. And you come here and you're a refugee, no language skills, no job. And all you have is the hope that someone will help you. I've had a lot of conversations with Ukrainians on this topic. You have to accept this help. You don't have to be ashamed of it. The times are just like this.
As experience shows, here in Switzerland, most Ukrainians apply for psychological help, because in Switzerland there is a very well-developed culture of interaction with the psychologist. No matter where you go, to a general office or anywhere else, everyone asks you if you need a psychologist or if you need psychological help.
You mean they're being encouraged to do it?
Yes, they are reminded that they have that opportunity.
When we started as an association, most of the Ukrainian organizations were involved in humanitarian aid, fundraising, collecting aid, and sending it to Ukraine. That's all very important. But what to do with the people who come here and they're totally confused? That was the question we decided to do. We decided that we were going to focus on just that. We are going to partner with local organizations. We're going to partner with Ukrainian organizations that exist here. Our main focus of work is to help people who have come here. We help them settle down, find their own people, understand what they need to do to integrate a little bit here. We hold basic French language courses so a person can say something about himself. For example, they could introduce themselves, ask how to go somewhere, for example, to the hospital or to the store. We hold classes for children of preschool and school age. We know that women, mothers, need help. The focus is on programs that support women and children, especially children under the age of 4. These are children who have to go to kindergarten because here school starts at age 4. For school-age children, there are already certain programs. For preschool-age children and for the Swiss living here, it's a very big problem. I haven't given birth yet, but I'm already on the waiting list to the kindergarten. I know that after I give birth, it will be a year or two before I can get in line, but you have to remind about yourself regularly and say that this is relevant.
Does it cost money?
Yes, you need to pay, and it's quite expensive. Let's just say it makes very little sense from a financial point of view. If there are two people working in the family, one salary will go to kindergarten and a babysitter. You can stay home and not work, or go to work and give one salary to the kindergarten and babysitter. For myself, I understand that when I have a child, I will need to plan my life so that I can also work and have a child near me. Most likely it will be freelancing. I will have to work for myself. It is very stimulating for entrepreneurship.
The cheeses are here for about 3 or 4 days. At first, we soak the cheese for 24 hours, then it dries out here and we take it to the basement to a special room for ripening. There it will ripen. By the way, the cellar is 300 years old. It's stone, ancient. Then we make these stickers. This cottage cheese we made on the 16th. Alpage du Colombier is the name of this cheese factory. Now a very important process. We get the grain out. We have to scoop as much as possible. That's the hardest thing for me. You have to twist that stick. It's physically difficult. Yes, we are taking it out, but there is still some grain. The most interesting process is about to begin. That's it. We've finished the hardest part. Now we are going to do breathing exercises. We have to wash everything quickly. You have to wear a long robe because it's very easy to get dirty. It's very hot, I didn't know that, and when I took it out, I got burned. It left a mark on my hand. Yes, you have to get used to everything. Now we wait, then we will form cheese heads. And then we just come to turn the cheese, and then we wash it in the basement. I also have my own school, and people often ask me there, Tanya, I want to start making cheese. What I need for that? The first thing you need is to love cheese. The work is very hard, and if you don't love cheese, sooner or later you will burn out. Even I find it very difficult. I get very tired, everything hurts, but when you love it, it inspires you. Mentally, you have to go through these turning points. Yes, it's all beautiful, romantic, making your own cheese, that's all it is, but physically, it's very hard. The first 3 days when I woke up in the morning, I felt a lot of crepation, and I asked myself, what do I need it for? But every morning I wake up and I go here because I love it. It doesn't matter how much money you make here. I was offered a job in the vineyards or bar. They paid me more, but it wasn't for me. What can I say? I think I just have cheese instead of heart.
How are Ukrainians positively different from previous waves of migration? Because we are very creative, very talented and professional nation. We don't like to sit at home and get money for nothing. We want to work. This is the first thing people come to me with when they move to Switzerland because of the war. They want to work. I try to help them in any way I can in terms of resources, in terms of informational support. Ukrainians should understand that you don't have to accept any low-paid job. Try to find a job where you can apply your skills best. Try to take advantage of the opportunity that Switzerland gives you. Use this opportunity to requalify, to learn the language, to make contacts in the city or in the canton you live in. You need to have your diplomas recertified, especially if it concerns licensed professions such as doctors, cosmetology, law, helping other people in the medical field. For all professions, all diplomas must be validated. For office professions, for creative professions, for professions that are non-licensed, everything is much easier. It all depends on the contacts you can make. How well you know the language, how freely you can communicate and get along in the areas where you can find work.
Today, the Swiss do not want to work with their hands. Young Swiss go to work in Geneva, in Zurich. Why do all these companies take on rent? Because there is no one else to work for. Yes, of course, you won't find a job here that you had in Ukraine. For example, a job as a director. Language, traditions, career growth, in this respect, are difficult. However, you can find a temporary job here while there is a war in Ukraine. In my opinion, it's very easy. My friend came here, I found her job 3 days later. I found a job in the vineyards, pruning the grapes, trimming the branches, tying it up, cutting the grapes. Then I had another very cool experience working in a bar. I made cocktails. The tips were big. Working in the vineyards was not every day. I worked 2 days and then I had to wait, and while I was waiting, I worked at the bar. It was a very cool experience. I worked together with my friend from Ukraine. When we drove to work in the morning, it felt like we were in an institute. It was as if life had turned us away to the past, and we forgot about our ambitions. Because in Ukraine, we thought that not every job was suitable for us. And I looked over and over. I said that this job is not for me. Here, you understand that it doesn't humiliate you in any way. For me, physical labor, working with my hands, is a certain meditation. And it helped me to distract a little from constant thoughts about the war.
When I arrived, I started looking for groups on Facebook, communities of Ukrainians. I don't remember exactly how. I found integration centers. They had an open door where you could come and socialize, get to know each other. I heard that they were looking for psychologists. I left my contact information and said that I was ready to work with them. Then they called me back and invited me to work with them. That's how it happened. For the first 2 months, I was sitting and scrolling through the newsfeed. I was looking at the horrors, and I realized that by scrolling through the news feed on Facebook, I wasn't helping myself or anyone else. So I decided to choose 2 directions to help Ukrainians. I chose charity, different volunteer projects in which I could help people fight hunger. I calculated for myself that 800 hryvnias would be the cost of food for 1 person per 2 weeks. I will try in various ways to raise money for food. I will do charity evenings or just fundraisers or something else I will do. That's the first priority for me. And the second is self-development, because now everyone is talking about how important it is for Ukrainians to develop today. Yes, our country is at war, but we have to understand how we will return to Ukraine. I can return in two ways. First, without higher education in Switzerland, or with higher education, which will be better for my country, with or without education. Besides this self-development, it distracts because mentally it's very difficult when you do nothing. It's hard to find a job here. I haven't tried it, but I know that I won't go to the professions that I'm not comfortable with, because I already have my own experience and I know what I want in my life. I understand that now I have to invest in myself in order to have an opportunity to realize myself in the future, either in Ukraine or here.
Our association has a line of work that helps people write resumes. There are different coaching programs and so on, all to make it a little easier for people. But we understand that without knowing the language, it will be very difficult to do all this. So it's very important that you know English, you know French or German, depending on which canton you are in. One of the areas we are trying to develop is the opportunity to be self-employed, to provide services. That is also very important. As for services, in Switzerland, things are very sad in this area. That was one of the things that also surprised me a lot. When I moved to Switzerland, I thought it was heaven on earth, that everything here was of the highest level, that there was excellent service. Unfortunately, that is not the case. Switzerland has quite a lot of problems with the beauty sector from my point of view. Ukrainian women are used to the fact that manicures, pedicures, hairstyles, cosmetologists, massages are all must-haves. Here it is luxury. Unfortunately, the quality is not very high, and the prices are very high. I think there is a lot of opportunity in such service fields for our creative people who are used to better service. The food market also offers many opportunities. As for the restaurant business, it is not very well developed in Switzerland. There are very expensive restaurants where everything is very expensive and not bad. Not bad at all. It is impossible to just eat sushi for a little money here in Switzerland. There are very few craft goods cafes. It's all a service industry, which, in my opinion, is not very well developed here. That's the thing I noticed here. I think that's the problem. As for the restaurant, it's more my husband's story. All his life he dreamt of having his own place, his own restaurant. We didn't see a Ukrainian restaurant here. He wanted it to be a bar with Ukrainian cocktails that are based on old traditions, stories. That was his vision. But he came to the point where he decided to go to study. He got a patent, he got a permission to have a restaurant, and we opened a restaurant. We have a family business for two families. We invested our own money because those are the rules in Switzerland, that you can't take an investment if you don't have a history. You have to show that you have worked hard before. This place was given to us, we didn't choose it. You can't take what you want. You have to prove to the owner of the restaurant that this is the place that should be yours. We took what we were given, but we really liked the location. This place is very light and not very big. It was an important moment for us just to try our story with the restaurant. We started working, and little by little, month by month, we brought everything here. We ordered something in Ukraine. My husband ordered these beautiful pictures, Marchuk, Shevchenko, and here we have also Taras Shevchenko. We got these patterned chandeliers from Ukraine as a present for my husband. From Western Ukraine, we ordered these carpets, which we put on the bench. From home, we brought everything we had. These are my books. My husband's parents gave us these Petrikovsky paintings. I thought there would be more expats and Ukrainians among the visitors, but we also had a lot of Swiss people coming in. Most of all, we sell borscht, that's our number one order, and vareniki, that's what the Swiss love the most. A portion of borscht is about 300 milliliters. It has meat and dumplings, which we also bake ourselves. A portion like this costs 10 francs.
How are the Swiss different from the Ukrainians? By their attitude to life. They like to enjoy life. They have no problems. The country hasn't seen war for 200 years. The country has had a stable economy for 200 years and a clear vector of development. I live in Canton Valais, and the name of the city is Sierre, translates as the city of the sun. It has 300 days of sunshine a year. There are a lot of vineyards here. It's a city of vineyards. So the village where I lived during the first few months when I arrived, there are about 200 people living there, and there are 6 wineries there. Can you imagine that? It also surprised me that they were drinking wine here in the morning. You drive by at lunchtime and you see them sitting in a cafe drinking wine, and it surprised me a little bit. Then I realized that this is a culture. In our country, we say, let's meet for coffee, and here they say, let's meet for an apero, and that's necessarily a bottle of wine for 2 at least. At first, it was very strange for me. There are strict rules here, but little by little you start to get excited about them by yourself. Here I really like the trash sorting rule. I really like the silence regime from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's a little different on the weekends. I really like it. Then I also like the way they have a railroad system. It functions like clockwork. You don't have to plan your route a month in advance. You go to your phone at any time, look in the app for directions, and go wherever you want to go.
This Swiss pass is a pass for 2 zones. It's Zone 11, which is the center of Lausanne, and Zone 12. There are 2 cool universities over here. One is called UNIL, and the other one is called EPFL, which is a very cool polytechnic, and this is a very cool university in Lausanne, one of the best humanities universities. That's where I want to go now, because I'm thinking of entering it. I've never bought tickets, but you need them. Choose 2 tickets. Click on several tickets. 2. Is that right here?
Yes.
It's 2.40 francs to pay. I think you can already pay. This is your ticket. So we got a ticket to Grand Lausanne.
How many hours? How does it work?
I've understood. That's what we paid for the dog. We bought a dog pass. It's 2.40. And it's 3.70 for a person. By mistake, we bought a ticket for the dog for 2.40. It's 90 hryvnias to go 1 hour on the subway. For a dog, a person needs to spend more than 100 hryvnias. But we must understand that the state does for us a great preference. It gives us a free pass. We have an hour, so let's go. There are no turnstiles, but if you get caught, there's a fine of 100 francs.
Is this ours?
Yeah, that's ours. And you know what else is cool? You can't talk loud when you're on the train. No one here talks loudly on public transport. Everyone is silent on the train. That's very interesting. For example, you take the train from Lausanne to Paris, you go through the Swiss part, everybody keeps quiet. You go through the French part, and everybody starts talking. Here they respect your right to comfort. Everything is close by. You take 2 steps and you're on the subway. You take 2 steps and you're on the train. You can travel 500 kilometers and not realize it was hard at all. In Switzerland, we were allowed to use local transport for free in the first months of the war. When I traveled with 4 transfers, 400 kilometers, I didn't feel tired. You understand that you can go from the east to the south in 4 hours.
The Swiss are very scrupulous. They have a Protestant culture, which means that they are used to living a limited life. If people have a lot of money, they won't show it to everyone. It's not about Switzerland. Being frugal in Switzerland is very polite. There is such a big difference between how wealth is perceived and the habit of showing it in Ukraine and in Switzerland. Here in Switzerland, you don't flaunt all the wealth you have.
Children are treated very well here. It was a very pleasant surprise to me that the parents, particularly the man, spend a lot of time with the children. The men have a real interest for children. My godson, Danya, came with me. All the men come up to him and play with him. There's no such thing here that you have a child and you have to stay at home with him. There are days for men here, there are days for women. It seems that if you give birth, the man has the right to stay with you for a while, maybe 10 or 20 days, to help the woman, and that's fair. Even if a woman comes here to find a Swiss man, that's also calculated at the legislative level. You have to live with your husband for 10 years. You have to pay taxes all that time, and only then they can consider your case.
These rules supposedly limit your freedom at the beginning, because we're not used to that. We have a free country. Then you realize that these rules are for your benefit. These are rules for sorting garbage, for discipline. To say that they are very different from us, they don't walk backwards. But I find their calmness and lack of emotion sometimes confusing. You can't tell if they like something or not. I like their love of comfort. In Switzerland, I live in the countryside, and when I go out for a run in the morning, you constantly hear bonjour, bonjour. They say hello to everyone, especially in the villages. It's very common to do this. In the big cities, it's a little bit different, but in the countryside, everyone says hello to everyone. I was born in the countryside, but I lived most of my life in the city. I was very used to civilization, and when I arrived, I didn't even know where we would live. I didn't know where we were going. What difference does it make? There will be people around. We came to a village in the mountains. I wasn't quite ready for such a life. All the women are hunters. For example, in the village where we live now, when hunting season starts, men and women take guns and go hunting. They hunt deer, goats, pigs. They give their children to grandparents. For that period, they babysit them, and their parents hunt while they do so. It was a shock to me. Everybody drives cars, tractors. When I came here, I wore shoes with heels, and then I wondered why I put them on. What hills? There are mountains everywhere. You have to walk uphill to the village. We are very worried about our children. We don't entrust our children to do any dangerous work. Here I saw a 5-year-old boy who was chopping firewood. I almost had a heart attack, and I asked them to take the axe away from the child because I was very scared. Or I also saw children helping in the farm with the cows. And that's very dangerous too. A cow can hit you. Everything can happen. Or I have seen a little boy who was driving the tractor, the car that was cutting the grass. It is still a machinery. They let them do all that. It was a shock to me. As for language, I knew German, and when I arrived, I could not understand what language they spoke. It was not German at all. Some individual words I understand, they're German, and in general, it's very strange. Turns out each canton has its own dialect. Then there is another interesting thing. Little kids go to kindergarten, to school. They have something like our parents' meeting, an open day. I was also invited once. I was well dressed, as we used to do in Ukraine. I wore the best that I had, all the jewelry. I thought it was the same here. Then I see that children's mother came after work with cows, came to the parents' meeting and didn't even change her clothes. I also worked at school. I knew this process. If we want to show something to people, we are getting ready to this. It's not an impromptu. We are trying to prepare our children morally and dress appropriately. There must be a dress code. And here I understand there is no such thing here. The teacher a bit chubby, wearing Crocs, and that's how she conducts the lesson. Such was the open day. That was a little shocking for me. I don't know. Maybe it's us doing something wrong. They don't show off. They are the way they are. They are very simple. At the beginning, it was shocking. Then I got used to it. Maybe that's right. They are more open, and I like it a lot.
Це французький кантон?
Так, це французький. А ось я покажу тобі. Там великий ліс, і за лісом вже німецький. Кантон Вале розмовляє 2 мовами. Є німецька частина, де ми були, і французька, як тут.
Тобто 2 мови?
Так, 2 мови.
А ти знаєш 3 мови?
Так, я знаю 3 мови. Французьку, німецьку, англійську. І трохи українську.
There are 27 or 28 cantons in Switzerland. You may encounter a situation. There are French-speaking cantons. Not all people speak and understand German. There are German-speaking cantons. There are also Italian cantons. 2% of the people speak Romance language. And this is still considered the official language. But the situation here is a little different because all these cantons were not originally one country. The historical context is different. Historically, they did speak different languages, and it is a unification and a demonstration of respect for each other. Ukraine has a slightly different statehood. In the restaurant, I try to communicate with the guests in Ukrainian. And when the Swiss ask me how to say merci in Ukrainian, I tell them «дякую». And they know «спасибо». But it's a completely different language. And it's a surprise for them. They thought it was almost the same language, and they are very different. So I try to communicate only in Ukrainian. I also speak Ukrainian at home with my children, because before I communicated with them only in Russian. I explain to everyone that these are such consequences of the Soviet Union. I was born in Chernihiv region. In my time, to speak Ukrainian used to be a low thing. I was told that if you speak Ukrainian, you won't have a future. Many years later, when I grew up and began to analyze, I realized that it was a methodical way to kill our identity by killing our language. The first task was to kill the language. Today, I'm trying to switch to Ukrainian at home. My children understand it, but it's hard for them to communicate. It takes time to do that.
I have met people who can no longer hear Russian because it evokes associations with an aggressor country. So I see that language is important. As a psychologist, I understand that it's important for them to have a Ukrainian psychologist speaking Ukrainian. That way they feel more unity, support through language. They feel their national identity that way.
I want to go home terribly. Every day, every morning, I recite the mantra, Tanya, you consciously stayed here because it's better. What would you do now in Ukraine? Sitting without doing anything and not knowing what to do? Now I have a movement. I'm busy doing something, and it's great. I earn money here, and then I'll take that money back to Ukraine to further develop my business.
It's difficult to plan, but I have made several plans for myself, and in each of them, I'm now implementing myself. Plan A is to return home. While this is dangerous for a variety of circumstances, it's dangerous for me. Plan B is to wait until Plan A is possible, but right now I want to do something important. So, Plan B is to study and to help Ukrainians fight against hunger, against humanitarian catastrophe. That's the kind of plans I have.
My sister and my niece are already back. They are already in Ukraine. She calls me and says, I have accepted the fact that we live in danger. But if I know that I have only one life to live, that's quite a philosophical question. If you know that the end of the world or atomic war will come in a month, how will you live through that time? And she says to me, I want to live this month with my husband. I want to live this time on my land, no matter how much time I have left to live. I want to enjoy life now. Here in Switzerland, I was at work all the time, and she couldn't. She was with the baby all the time. I entertained them as much as I could. We traveled a lot, saw a lot of things. She made the decision, and I understand. I convince myself every day too. If someone told me that I had only a month to live on this earth, I would want to live it at home with my family. I would hug and kiss my relatives. But I think about the positive. I know that I will come back in autumn, and I will develop my business.